It's my first session with Twitch, so I'm kind of nervous and excited as well. Yes, so I'm live on Twitch. Hi everyone, thanks for being here for this session today. So today I'll be talking about the new or the modified language features from the latest Java versions. What these features are, why you need them, and how you can use them in your application. And I will be live coding these features so that you know how to use them. And just in case if you're trying to Google me to find out what I do apart from presenting at amazing platforms with many publications, you can stop now. I work as a developer advocate with JetBrains. What that essentially means is that I help developers like you become more amazing and happy by using IntelliJ IDEA in the best possible manner. Which, as most of you would know, that it is the most used and loved IDE by the JVM and Java developers. I'm also a Java champion, and I have written a load of books with many publications, amazing publications, because I believe that writing Java certifications can take your skills, the Java skills and career to the next level. I also work closely with the community, developer communities. I co-lead the Daily Java user group and also the Women Who Code Daily chapter. I speak at a lot of conferences, colleges, user groups, and a lot of other events. And one thing that I really want to mention is about the technology grid, which is the newsletter which we have at Women Who Code Daily. And in this newsletter, every month we publish the interview of a leading lady in tech. And the aim of publishing the newsletter and the interview of a leading lady is to show the world that having a career for women is norm. It is not a choice. Okay, so before I deep dive into the latest Java features that I just mentioned, let me take a step back and talk about the Java's release cadence a little bit. Let me just check where I am. Yes, so this is okay. Yes, so Java 8 was released in March 2014, and Java 9 was released after around 3.5 years in September 2017. And with Java 9, the release cadence of Java changed. And now we have a new version of Java every 6 months. That's 2 new versions every year. So we already have Java 15, which was released in September 2020. And how does it impact the features which developers like you can access? And how does it affect, I would say, the features themselves? Is it good? Is it bad? I strongly believe that that is good. A shorter release cadence is good for the features and for the developers. The release cadence now is much more predictable, and the protagonist in the release cycle is not the feature as it was the case earlier. Now it is about the schedule of the release. So the features which are complete, they hop onto the train which releases on the scheduled time. And the other benefit is we as developers, we get to use the features as they come out, as they are ready to be used. And the other good thing is all the features get their due credit and importance, because if you talk about Java 8 and 9, which were big releases, only the main features, I would say, they got a lot of limelight, and other important features like compact strings, they did not get the importance, and I would also say they are not so much used by the Java developers. Or probably it is used, but they don't probably get the importance of using them. So it's a good thing. So these are the language features which I will try to cover in today's session. We'll start with the C classes and go up to type interference with lambda parameters, which was introduced, local type inference with var in Java 10. I skipped the Java versions on the last 2 lines. Sorry about that. Okay, so let me start with the first language feature that I want to cover, which is the C classes and interfaces released in Java 15. the latest Java version that we have. Java 16 would be released in March next year, but you can still access the early builds and you can try them out now from the OpenJDK website. Okay, so let me hop on to my editor to show you a demonstration of what these are. The C types. The syntax of this new feature, it allows you to restrict which classes or interfaces can extend your classes and interfaces. But why would you want to do that? The purpose is to create hierarchies which are secure. You have, as a developer, you have control over which other classes or interfaces can extend your classes. Again, why would you need that? Me as a developer, I would like to model my business domain in a way that I can control and define. So let me show you a quick example. Let's say this is a very basic bare-bones class that I have, which is plant. And I have a couple of other classes which extend this class. So I have climber, I have herb, and I have shrub. So these are all bare-bones classes, which of course these are bare-bones because I just wanted to get the reason for using these classes rather than getting entangled into the details. So now what I can do, assume that we don't have the seed classes and interfaces. In that case, I really cannot control which other classes can extend the class plant. But if I can seal this class, let me say that I want to seal the class. So quick things before I move forward. I'm using IntelliJ IDEA 2020.3, and every time I use a shortcut, you would see a green pop-up here towards the bottom of the window. Like I just said, Alt and Enter, which would show me the context actions. So you would be able to see that towards the end of the screen. I may not be able to kind of address the shortcuts or features of the IDE which I would be using in the session because that would kind of interfere a lot with what I'm trying to get across to you. And yes, the other thing is because I'm using the language features from Java 15, you would also have to set the you have to use Java 15 as your JDK for IntelliJ IDEA 2020.3, both the project level and the language level. Okay, so let's get started and let me see this class. Okay, what did I do? Oops, did I move them to some other class? No, I did not. Okay, so let me move it here. This is funny. Okay, so what did I do now? Okay, so probably I'm doing a lot of things here. Okay, so the module is unnamed. How can that be? This is a package. Okay, so let me try and create another quick example. Let me talk about, let's say, let me quickly create a class. I say the name of my class is, let's say, pen, and I create a hierarchy. I say class ball pen, and I say it extends pen. Okay, and I say class fountain pen, which is also referred to as ink pen. It extends pen, right? And let's say I have another type of class which is, let's say, I don't know, ink pen, which is same as fountain pen, but let's just use that for the example here. Now I could say that I want to seal my class. What happens here is when I say I want to seal my class pen, I have the extended class that has to be defined as either non-sealed or sealed, because let's say I say that this, if you can see the error message here, it says sealed, non-sealed, or final modifiers are expected. So when you are sealing your base class, then the hierarchy that should be well defined, and the class ballpen should be either final, I can say final class ballpen. I can say the fountain pen class is non-sealed, and I can again say it's a sealed class. When I say the extended class is sealed, then I would have to define another hierarchy for this sealed class. So let's not go into that part now because that might take a long time. So, and because this all the classes are defined in the same source file, I really don't need to define the permits clause here. But if the source files could be defined in separate source files, I would need the permits clause. So this is how I would need this clause. Okay, let me just close this window and I say ink pen. So this is how the sealing would behave or how it would be done. Let's hop on to an example which talks about how you would want to use this. So let's go back to the plant example which I mentioned earlier. Let's say I already have a hierarchy in place where I say plant is extended by multiple other classes like cucumber, climber, herb, shrub. One typical example is how you would like to kind of process this code. This is, as developers, we work with this code quite often where we talk about how we want to process the extended types. And depending on a particular type, we want to kind of take some action. Like in the first case, I say that if the plant is a type of cucumber, I want to call a certain method. I know I could have called kind of address this using polymorphism, but that doesn't really work all the time. And the other thing is what happens if another programmer joins in, or another developer joins in the team, and they define another type which was not meant to be in the first place. How could you do that? How can you control the of course, let's say if you make your class plant inaccessible in a package or a module, that's one of the ways you can do that. If something is not accessible, you cannot extend it. Excellent, lovely. But we are not talking about this here. With the sealed types, we are decoupling the accessibility with extensibility. I should be able to access class plant, but still limit or control which other classes could extend it. Let's take a quick example. Let's say you go back home and you've got gifts for your kids and you have two kids. And some other person says, okay, so what if the elder kid comes to you? You'll say, okay, I'll give the gift that I got for my elder kid. And the next question is, what do you do if the younger one comes? And you say, of course, I have the gift for the younger one as well, and I'll give it to that, the younger child. And what happens if the question is, what would if another kid comes and what would you gift the child? Say, excuse me, I have just two kids. And you say, and the one who's asking the question says, no, but just assume this happens. What would you do in that case? This is the kind of situation that seed types is trying to address, because this is what, as developers, um, take a look at this else part here. What are we trying to do? We are trying to address a situation which we don't want or we don't anticipate, but we still have to address that in code. But with the seed classes, we really won't have to address that part. So this is what the seed type is trying to do. So probably in one of the future versions, when switch expressions would be enhanced, the pattern matching would extend to seed classes as well, to type testing as well. Probably this is what you would be able to do. Of course, this is still in works at Oracle, so you can't use it now, but probably one of the versions you will be able to do that soon. Right. So this is about the sealed classes. Similarly, you might want to seal your interfaces as well. So this is a quick example and how you can seal your interfaces as well. Now let me go back to the presentation. Now we're talking about the second feature, which is records. So this was added as a preview language feature in Java 14. So I would be mentioning whether a feature was a preview language feature, is still a preview language feature, or is it a standard language feature. And I'll talk about it a bit later. What do I mean by that? So this is one of my favorite examples. So what happens, so I'm trying to help you understand what a records is and why you would need that. So imagine you walk into a shopping mall and all the trousers are of the same size. And so of course, so depending on your size, the one that you pick could be big for you, tight for you, or small for you. And if you're lucky enough, that could be perfect. But what happens if that's the only choice, only options you have, and you have to buy the trouser? What do you do with it? Of course, you get it home and you alter it. So as Java developers, we have been doing that with the regular classes that we have to define the data classes. Data classes are the classes which are just an aggregation of some set of data that we want to wrap and probably store it in a database, send it over on a network, or do any XYZ thing with it. Now, with records, this feature has been built into the language itself. So let me show you one example. Okay. Did I miss the example? Okay. So, right. Okay. So, this is an example where I want to, let's say, have a data class or a record person, and I want to, let's say, wrap a string type, which is the name, and let's say this is the age of person, and I want it to write it to a file and then probably read it from a file. Since you know that this is in orange, that really means that this doesn't exist. So what can we do? Let me say that I want to create a record person, and when I click on it, so I get the option, and now I say this is string and this is int age. So this is how I can do that, and my code which is here would work. And what would happen if you did not have the access to records? You would really create a plain what we call a Java module, where you would have a class person with the instance variables string, name, int, age, and you IntelliJ IDEA and probably the other IDs as well can help you generate a lot of code like getters, setters, toStrings, equal, and hash code. But that would mean that you would have to, in the first place, generate all the code, of course, by the help of the IDE. But any other person who would be reading the code would also need to read everything, which is not required now. So let me go here and let me run it. Let's see if that works. So I just have some simple methods, which is write to file, which takes an object, writes it to text file on in the same directory on the same system. Let's see if it works. Will it work? Will it break? I was pretty sure it would break. Let's see what happens. Okay, not serializable exception. So probably just need to add that it implements the serializable interface. Let's go back to the class and let's see if it works now. I hope it does, and it should. Right. Yes. Now you can see the output here, and that verifies that with just one line of code, you were able to create a record, and the uh, with the components name, which is a string value, and an int component with the name age. So this is how creating records is simple and uses just one line to do all the work. What else can you do with a record? Okay, we just talked about that. Yes, I just missed mentioning that it's a new type declaration, because if you go back to the declaration, you don't say it's a class, you say it's a record. So it's a new type of declaration. Now we just talked about using records. So you are creating a record like any other. Let me just kind of move this. Probably it is messing around. Okay. Ha ha ha. Okay, let's keep it the way it is. Okay. So I just mentioned that this one, the initialization of a record, works like a regular class. You are using the constructor the way you would use the constructor of any other class. And the methods that we had here, which can be used to write any instance to a file and retrieve that object, works with the record as well. So we talked about using the record. Let's quickly talk about whether you can add fields, methods to a record or not. So now when I talk about this record, I am defining the state of record person by using the variables, the components or the instance fields, name and age. Should I be allowed to add more fields to this? I say no, but let's try. Let's say that I want to add address to this record. As you can see, it says instance field is not allowed in a record. What does that mean? That means is that the state of a record should be defined only using the components that you define in the declaration and not otherwise. Of course, I can add static members to it. I can say static int counter. This is allowed, and I could also define static methods. Let's say I say static int get counter. I say return counter. So this one is allowed as well. I could also define instance methods in a record. I could say, let's say public. I say string. Let's say get name in uppercase. And I say return name dot to uppercase. So this is allowed as well. So I can define instance methods, but I cannot define instance fields. So what is the problem here? So let me check. Okay, so there's a typo. Okay, so get name uppercase. Oh, that's a typo as well. Okay. So, and the other thing to note is that the getters of a record, they don't use the get notation. They use the name of the accessors are the same as the name of the instance fields. And it's different to what we have been used to as Java developers. So we don't have the get notation here because probably the creators of the new feature, they did not want to pollute how we were kind of used to using it. Because as we know, those notations came from when we were working with the visual components in Java. So that really doesn't make a lot of sense now. So let me go back and see, did we miss anything? Okay, yes, the other important point I missed is, can I add another constructor? Can I overload the constructor? Can I modify the default behavior of the constructor? Let's see if we can do that. Let me just kind of get rid of all this code and let's say I can say alt and insert, and okay, I can add a constructor, and let's say I want to verify whether the age is less than or greater than 0. If age is less than 0, then I want to throw new illegal argument exception saying that age can't be less than 0. So this is how I just modified the constructor of record. Note that I don't have the braces right after the constructor name. By default, the values of these components would be passed to the constructor, and then this code would be called. So you can modify the constructor of a record, and you can also make it you can add generics to the constructor, sorry, to a record. I think I already had, yes, so I already have an example here in which this is a record which has a generic parameter which is passed to it. And so this is, let's say, a example of class table, and this is how you can initialize this record, passing it table as a parameter. And the other thing is that you can pass annotations. You can mark the components of a record with annotations, like I've done that with not null here. So let's see what else is. Okay, this one kind of gets, okay, so we talked about adding annotations, and we talked about serializing the records. That was the first example that we talked about. So I think we're pretty done with the records. Let's see what else do we have. Now let's move to the pattern matching for instance of. That's again one of my favorite features. It was introduced as a preview language feature in Java 14, and it has been made it would be a standard language feature in Java 16, which is going to release in March next year. So what is it about? So let's see an example and see what pattern matching for instance of is. So assume that you have a method here, and let's say if object, I am expecting a string value to be passed to this method parameter, which is object. So how do I code that? I say if object, then I say instance of string, then I probably create a new variable, and then I cast this, and then probably I just I want to print out a value. Let's say I want to say to uppercase, or we'll just keep it like this. What happens here is, what would I want to do after I compare the type of variable to a certain type? The next obvious step would be to cast it so that I could do something with the value. Whenever you are programming, or otherwise if there are any processes that you are following and you see some sort of repetition, that would be the perfect place to kind of modify the process to make it less repetitive. So this is what pattern matching for instance of is doing in Java 14, since Java 14 I would say, because it was introduced in Java 14 but modified, not really modified, there were no modifications for it in Java 15. So what can we do here? Pattern matching for instance of would take away that extra step of defining this variable and of casting it. How many times do you have to kind of count the number of opening and the closing braces to make sure you are doing it the right way? Of course, when I work with an IDE like IntelliJ IDEA, I get code completion a lot of times, and that saves me from counting those round brackets, but it's really hard if I'm working with a text editor. So let's see how it can change. I can say, show me the context actions, and I can say replace a value with a pattern variable. Now see the change here. I select this, and now a variable has been introduced as a pattern variable right after the type string. Now I no longer have to define another variable, and I don't have to cast it too. Do you think that was too simple to count it as a new feature or to get excited about it? Think again. Let me show you another example. So this is one class where the equals method tries to match the values of the fields, and of course if they are equal it returns true. Let's see how pattern matching for instance of can help here. If you see, IntelliJ IDEA would highlight any improvements which are possible by marking them with a different kind of background. So in this case, I can say Alt and Enter and get those suggestions. So it says I can replace other with a pattern variable, which I do. Now, if you can see, I have two if statements right one after the other, and I think I can merge them as well. So I say merge nested if, and this is what I reduce the code to. I still have some suggestions because I can see that this has a yellow background. Let's see what the suggestions are. It says I can simplify if else. Okay, so I just simplified this case, and if I just format this, of course I could do that using settings as well, but I just did that manually because that would take some time, and I just don't want to kind of invest that for the session. Now if you go back to the method that we had initially and look at the method that we have now, that would give you a kind of sense how you could use one feature in combination with the other features, and then is when the magic happens. Are you still not convinced? Let me show you another example. So this is one of my favorite examples for pattern matching, and let's see how we can make this method, which is the process child node, concise. I am replacing child nodes with pattern matching. Now I'm merging the nested if statements. I am extracting the variable node here. Let me see where. Okay, so let me go to this, and I say replace this with a pattern variable. Now, what was here? Okay, no, this is not as it's supposed to. I'm sorry, I'm missing a step here. Let me kind of check. Okay, so this is how I was supposed to do it. Okay, yes. So I just inlined a variable. Now I have two nested ifs again, and I could merge them again. Now can you see the difference that I have? It has become much more concise, and this is how I reduced my initial code to these 4 lines of code. The code is not terse, it is readable, well readable, and of course it is much shorter. Doesn't have a lot of nested if statements, which is, I hope a lot of you would know that that's a code smell. And of course, we are not talking about creating a lot of variables, and it's much more readable. So that's how you can probably use multiple language features to get the magic. Now, I hope you are convinced that pattern matching, for instance, is a good feature to know about and use in your projects. So let me go to the text blocks now. again, one of my favorite features. You would actually hear me saying this for most of the features because they all are amazing and all of them are probably my favorite features. Okay, so let me go to switch expressions. No, we were talking about text blocks. Right. So, okay, so let me just copy this one and let me move this to this line of code. So what happens when the strings are small? They are easy to read, easy to write. Let's say I say this a small string. This is, let's say, hello. This is a small one, and let's say let me add more text to it. Okay, this is still small, but what do you think about this one? This is a long string, and what can you do about it? Let's say, okay, I can probably split the string and move it to the next line by adding probably some concatenation operator. So this is legible with a lot of concatenation operators, but not the best thing to do. And what happens, let's see, if I add, okay, so this is again one of my favorite. Let me define a string where I say this is a string and which has a JSON value, and the JSON value is this. So what's happening here? I am getting a lot of special characters in terms of preserving how the original string was. So it's a new line character, and then the double quotes which were included in the JSON value that has to be escaped using another backslash. So now this is kind of becoming quite ugly to read, to write. Of course, I could use the IDE so that every the escape sequences, they could be just added, they were added by the IDE. But what happens if you really have to write everything on your own? That becomes messy at times. So what can we do about it, and how do the text blocks help? Now, this is how the text blocks help. Text blocks are multi-line string values where you can define your, of course, as I mentioned, multi-line strings without the need to having the concatenation operator at the end, or without escaping your double quotes using a backslash. Now, this, as you can see, is amazing. It is so simple to read and understand. And what happens to, let's talk about what happens to the spaces here. Would that be included in string value or would that be excluded? This is what is called the incidental white spaces. Not sure if you can see the vertical green line here, which is drawn by the IDE. That gives you a sense of the spaces that would be included in the string value. So when I move this value to the left or the right, the vertical line moves as well, stating that this is how the spaces, these are the spaces that would be included as part of the values. And I could also change the placement of probably the double quotes or the values here to change the incidental white spaces that go in. And Java hasn't created another type of string. We are still talking about the old string. It is just a syntactical sugar that you get. The opening and the closing delimiters are triple double quotes. I know, a tongue twister. So 3 double quotes. You start your text block or the multi-line string with this, and you end it with this. And in between, of course, one rule that you need to follow is that the opening delimiter should be followed by a new line and then the value starts. If you delete this, that will not work. And you can use escape sequences like backslash and backslash s to determine whether you want to have the new line or the trailing spaces uh, for each line. Now, the other thing which is interesting is um, since this is a multi-line string value and you can see that it has JSON value in it, I can also use inject language or reference in IntelliJ IDEA. And you can do that whether you are using multi-line string values, which was introduced in Java 13, or whether you are using your regular strings, which was introduced ever since Java came into being. So when I say inject language or reference, I can select what type I want to inject. And can you see this error here? It says comma or a closing brace is expected. What does that mean is, let me add a comma here. When I inject language reference or inject language or reference into a string, whether that's a text block or a regular string, I can get code completion, identification for those languages or references, which is quite a handy feature. And yes, let me just show you one thing. When I say quick documentation, you can see that this is still your favorite string class and Oracle did not add a new type of string. So this is about the multi-line string values or text blocks. So let me cover the other one, which is the switch expressions. This was added in Java 12. So this was the first language feature which was added as a preview language feature. Before that, Oracle did not have that concept. Of course, as shown in the slide, it has been made a standard language feature in Java 14. So let's hop on to the editor to see how it works. Okay, so I already have an example code in place, and you can see that this is so this is the class planet. I have an enum here, and this is a method which is calculating the damage that you do to the planet by using single-use plastic items. Folks, please don't do that. Try to use as much as non-single-use plastic items, which you could reuse probably over a period of time. And then you have the switch statement, which calculates the damage, has a break statement, and at the end, it returns the value. What is the problem here? Now, again, as I mentioned with the pattern matching for instance of, look for the repetitions. In each case label, I'm assigning a value to the variable damage. Here, again here, and in the last one. I have a repetition in terms of the break statements. And of course, as you know, if I miss this break statement, that would result in a logical error. What do we have here? Okay. So let me take that off. So missing a break statement can result in a logical error, which I would not like me to code like that. The other thing is this is an expression, and I'm actually using it as an expression because I'm trying to evaluate something. I'm trying to assign a value to the variable damage. Let's see how the switch expressions work. Switch expressions are the modified form of switch statements which allow you to return a value like an expression, like what you would expect from a method which returns a value. So let me invoke Alt Enter, and I can select replace with switch expression. So if you just I'm not sure if you notice, switch is highlighted with a yellow background. That means that my IDE has some suggestions here, and I could get to those suggestions by using the magic key combination Alt and Enter, and then I can select the action that I want to perform. So let me select replace with switch expression. And this is how the code changes. Notice how you get rid of all the repetitions here. I'm not assigning a value to to the variable damage in all the case labels. And I'm also, um, I don't need the break statement, that's implicit. And I can also delete this. I could have a code block, let's say, uh, instead of this, I can say, let's say I have some code here, but I still need to return a value, and I say yield, and I could do this. And now, so for every case table, I could have a code block instead of just returning a value. The only thing that you need to take care of is that the code block must return a value. Of course, switch statements have not gone away. You can still use the switch statements. Now let me go back to my IDE and see what. Right, so this one is again my favorite. So this one was introduced, local variable type inference using var was introduced in Java 10. And I have a couple of slides for you to explain that better. I know the IDE works, but the concepts are equally important, which I have great slides for you. Imagine, so this is a puzzle which I show you, and I would show you three options, and you have to guess which one of those puzzle pieces would fit in here. Do you think this one fits in? Or this one? Or probably this is a good fit? Yes, you're right. Option 3 is the right answer. So what did we do here? I showed you a puzzle and then the missing piece, and depending on the shape of the missing piece that was shown to you, you were able to pick up the right option. And this is what the type inference for local variable is with using var. So when we talk about type inference, the compiler can determine the type of your variables depending on the information that you give in the code. Let's say when I say string name is Java everywhere, I have the type of variable name as string, and I'm assigning it a string value. Now again, if you notice, it is redundant information. The type is string and the type of the value is string. And again, I say the type of datetime is local datetime, and I assign it a value which is of the same type. Again, this applies to this value as well. What if I could change all these variable types to, let's say, var? This works now. This works perfectly because the Java compiler, it still has all the information which it needs to determine the type of this variable. Of course, the variable names becomes more important now. So this is how type inference for var works. Java is still a statically typed language. We are not, Java is not becoming a dynamic language. We want to catch all the issues with the code early on rather than kind of catching it during the runtime. Now, this again is one of my favorite. As I mentioned, when you talk about type interference, and let's go back to the puzzle example. What if I did not show the main puzzle to you? Would you have been able to determine what the right option would be? No, that would not be possible. In the same way, if you do not assign a value to a local variable, the compiler cannot determine the type of that variable. So this is what this image is trying to say, that if the value that you assign to variable age is null, the compiler cannot determine its type and your code will not compile. And so this goes with the uninitialized variables as well. Again, we're talking about local variables because the name of the feature is local type inference with var. So if you don't assign a value or if you assign it a null value, in both the cases, that will not work because the compiler doesn't get all the information it needs. So this is a quick example of where you can use var. You can also use it in instance initializer blocks and static initializer blocks. And of course, all these are local variables as you know defined within the constructor. This is, you cannot, okay, let's quickly go on to the next slide. So yes, this one works as well. Now a quick example about how it benefits, apart from just helping you to cut down on the type that you need to write in when you are writing your code. It also works well when you're trying to kind of call multiple methods, chained methods, and you don't really have to bother about the return type of that method. Because in this example, if you have to even think about what the type is, whether it's an int or a char or a string, then you are good to use var because in that case, the compiler would do the work for you. So you are not working for the compiler is working for you in this case. Okay, so I also had a lot of examples, but we won't be able to do that now. So let me quickly go to, what did we talk about? Just a moment. Oh, where was I? This is insane. Did I stop my presentation? Okay, this is insane. Did I stop my presentation? Okay. This is insane. Did I stop my presentation? Why am I listening to my voice? This is insane. Did I stop my presentation? Why am I listening to my voice? This is insane. Did I stop my presentation? Why am I? Okay, so probably, oh, I'm so sorry. I started another window and I was listening to my own voice. Okay, so the last feature that I want to cover is the lambda parameters and var. To show that, let me hop on to my editor real quickly and let me see where I have the example code. Okay, so this is example of I'm defining a variable function which is of type predicate and I'm passing an integer to it, and the function really is if I pass an integer value x, depending on whether x is greater than 12 or not, this function should return a Boolean value to me. So let me duplicate this line of code and let's modify this one. Okay, so let me just kind of redo it. And this is how I could define my code. And there's another way to define this code. I could also say integer. So what is the last way? Now I can say var. So this is what type inference for lambda parameters is. So if you have been using lambda parameters earlier, you know that this works. Just a moment. So in this case, the compiler is already smart enough to know that the type of x is integer here. But with the introduction of var in Java 10, the creators of the language, they just wanted to make sure that you could use var with the lambda parameters as well. So this is again, I would say, syntactic sugar. The other benefit is you could use not null annotation here, which would not have been possible if this was without using either an explicit type or var. So this is the benefit that you get. So this is lambda parameters and var. So, okay, we've already covered that. Okay, let me quickly talk about the preview language features, what they are. As I mentioned early during the session, preview language features were introduced in Java 12, and there were a means to get the feedback from the developers who are using these features, because unlike the previous release cycles where there was a difference of around 3 years, 3.5 years between two release cycles, now the new versions are being released every 6 months. And it's kind of not possible to add a feature and then take it off the language. That doesn't work. That could be applied to the Java APIs. Once added the Java API, some of it could be deprecated and probably removed sometime later, but this doesn't work with the language feature. So Brian Getz is the person who leads the project Amber, which addresses the modification of existing Java features or addition of new ones. And he mentioned that yes, they are looking for developer feedback on the latest Java features. So this is an old tweet regarding switch expressions, as I said, when the Java preview language features were introduced. But this applies to all the preview language features that we have and you could be working on. So there is no hard deadline, but of course, the sooner you get the feedback, the better it is. And you can actually use this link to access how to submit your feedback. And Oracle does listen, because one of the features was changed in switch expressions. Earlier, it was using a break keyword to return a value from the branches. But after the feedback it received, it changed that to yield, YIELD, as I showed you in the example, because a lot of developers complain that it was kind of interfering with the break statements that they are used to working with. Again, this Brian Gates is talking about the deadlines. That there are no deadlines, but yes, the sooner the better you get the feedback to the team. That would be great. So thank you so much for listening to the session. Let me see if I have any questions here. This is interesting because I can't see my chat window here. Let's see if I could. How do I get to the chat window? Let me see. Strange things happen, right? I could see the chat window when I started with my session, but I can't see that now. So I don't know what's happening, whether I would be able to. Okay, so video capture device, audio display. Okay, so let me kind of. I can see the chat window, or probably I could see the chat window on. Right, so let's see if I could go to Manning's Twitch channel and see if I'm still streaming, and I could see this is interesting. So it says Manning is live and I can see. This is interesting. But I don't know, I cannot see a lot of messages or any message. Am I looking at the right stream? Okay, so let me confirm whether I have any message. Did I get any questions? I can't seem to find them. I just logged on to the. Okay. Okay, so no worries. If you have any questions, probably if you want to ping me about any of the features that I talked about today, or otherwise, you can reach out to me. My Twitter handle is emalagupta, and I would be good to answer your questions there. Thank you so much, and I hope to present on Manning's Twitch channel again. Bye-bye.